Hello, everybody. Today I want to talk about the Quakers. They are officially known as the Religious Society of Friends, but became known as Quakers for how they trembled in the way of God. If you see any place that has the word Friends in its name, chances are it was founded by a Quaker. I want to talk about them because they are a good showcase of advocacy and doing what's right in a society that is very much not doing what's right. The Quakers got their start in the Americas fairly early on. They were trying to escape religious persecution in England, only to find it again in the New World. The Quakers first start getting established in America in the mid 17th century, but it's not until a few decades later that England starts clamping down on religious discrimination laws, and the Quakers are able to get a foothold outside of Pennsylvania. Quakers are still a pretty new Protestant sect at this point. The actual founder of Quakerism went to Maryland a few times, but they make a name for themselves for how kind of radically progressive they are for the time. Overseas, they openly defy the Church of England and practice Quakerism in public. They believed in spiritual equality for men and women, so women had more of an active role in both day to day life and in the church. It wasn't the level of equality that we have today, but women did have an unusual amount of power for the time. This comes from the Quaker idea that God comes from within and not from outside power structures like the church, whose corruption the Quakers saw in England. This might seem generic to us today, but it ended up affecting a lot of the Quakers' beliefs on gender and race. The Quakers had a few other qualities that also buck assumptions that people today make about Christianity. For example, they don't baptize or believe that any other kind of ritual is necessary for salvation. In fact, they won't even swear on Bibles in court since they don't make oaths. They are pacifists, so they never engaged in a lot of the violence that the other Christian Americans did, and they had fairly amicable relationships with the Native Americans, usually. But probably what they're most famous for is their actions on slavery. It was no secret to people back then that slavery was horrible, and despite many of the founding Quakers being slavers, by the turn of the 18th century, it was becoming clear that slavery was fundamentally unworkable and it had to go. There was a lot of internal strife, but after a few decades of protests and boycotts in 1777, the Quakers in Maryland free their slaves. And this is not a small task. Especially in southern Maryland and the Eastern Shore, slavery was a huge part of the economy. Many Quakers were financially ruined because of this, but they didn't do it because they wanted to make money. They did it because it was right. Now, that's not to say that Quakers were some perfect champions for social justice. Some Quakers still would rent enslaved people from larger plantations. Some Quakers technically freed their slaves, but still effectively forced black people to work for them under identical conditions to slavery. Many churches would still segregate their pews, and of course, there was still a belief in rigid societal roles along gender and race, even if they were more egalitarian. That's not to say that the Quakers actually did no good, or that all of them agreed with these views, but it's just something to keep in mind when talking about history. There's very rarely groups of people that had the perfect views that we have today. And, to their credit, the Quakers did tend to come around on these issues faster than society at large. The Quakers would later go on to be an essential part of the Underground Railroad. If you ever hear of a white person helping an enslaved person escape in Maryland, chances are that white person was a Quaker. For example, it was a Quaker woman who first told Harriet Tubman where to find her first stop on the Underground Railroad, unlike what happened in that horrible, horrible biopic. Anyway, that is a basic overview of the Quakers in Maryland. So, what can you learn from them? 1. People can be convinced to make sacrifices. Now, I know that nowadays we like to think of humans as inherently selfish, but people can be convinced, or if needed, pressured, to do the right thing. 2 is that change takes time. The Quakers advocated for abolition for centuries before it happened. It might not seem like you're making any progress, and you might not even see your goal in your lifetime. That doesn't mean that you should give up. Change is always possible. And that's my video. I hope you liked it. Please like and comment on what topic you want me to make a video on next. Thank you.